This is not about Pro League and Super League. This is a league run by the Normalization Committee that I'm responsible for.
Nobody expected FIFA to fund this arrangement.
If we don't get a professional attitude towards this, we are doomed for failure.
You break the balance, trip the leg, control the body.
They ain't gonna stand put forever.
Why you want the Chiefs to lose so? Why you want the Chiefs to lose so?
They already have two. Lamar don't
Why?
have.
You're jealous because you know the Chiefs getting closer to the Patriots. Let's go to the last part.
No,
of the game.
no.
Let's go to the last part.
This is 10 Questions. I'm Andy Johnson. The distance from where we should be in the world in going forward on our commitments with climate change.
The effects of climate change that cannot be accounted for. It's called loss and damage, and we're seeing loss and damage happening so much more in this decade and the previous decade.
The principal term there was this question of the correspondent banking issues.
That is why we're trying to build capacity with this country here, Trinidad and Tobago, and other countries in the region. Man
is not showing any signs of stopping or even slowing down. More than half of the forest in Trinidad is already gone.
All the plants and all the animals and all of the nice clean water and fresh air and everything had to be on this planet for humanity to have a chance.
We have small change when it comes to countries that can take decisions, and when they speak, the world listens.
The General Assembly is a very democratic forum. And Trinidad and Tobago has the same vote as Canada, in spite of the obvious difference in size.
WESN.
Another morning in paradise. Welcome, this is Talking Point of WESN, the Content Capital Show. Michael Small here once again, joining you. Ashraf Ali will be joining me later on in the show. Not too later, hopefully, but in the meantime, a couple things to get to at the top this early morning. Didn't necessarily think that this was all that important, but the former Prime Minister is in the press again. Now, it's an interesting exercise in objectivity if you want to listen to anything he says publicly moving forward or even in the recent history. Because, of course, there are a lot of things other people disagree with him over. One of the things now that is being disputed is if he was invited to the PNM 70th anniversary celebration or not. He says that he was not. The party says that he was. He then went on to challenge and say, am I a liar? Or the quote is, so I am a liar, a rhetorical statement. I will not be sparring with them, but I stand by my statement until the pigeon makes the delivery. Now, the interesting thing is, he throws that out there. Granted, I can't say to what degree this would be, what would be the split with regards to PNM supporters, who will think that he is lying and who thinks that he's telling the truth. I don't know. But I do suspect that outside of that, there will be a not insignificant amount of the population who won't even really care about the facts of the case before them, or the lack of enough evidence to make a decision. They'll just say, yeah, that's what we think, which technically is not fair. However, that is unfortunately the position that he put himself in, at least in part by his own actions, right? I mean, there's more to it than that. That's an oversimplification, of course. But the perception that the country has with regards to his previous tenure It's not necessarily going to be all, you know, roses and rainbows and bunnies and fairy tales. It is, to some extent, a legacy fraught with controversy, and it remains to be seen how he will be remembered. But it's interesting that this happened, and I didn't necessarily make my remarks with regards to the PNM and how they viewed their history with this in mind or any knowledge of this, etc., etc. But I did point out, not this week and at times before, whereas the UNC seemingly is happy to divorce itself from its own leader's predecessor, at least to some extent, right, given some of her remarks on things like nepotism and the like. And the PNM as a party was, at least seemingly, very recently, willing and desired to associate themselves with their legacy through line all the way to its founding. Associate itself with, for the most part, the actions and statements of all of its leaders, including Mr. Manning, who didn't have the best relationship with Dr. Keith Rowley. They wanted to stand on the foundation of being the government in charge for the majority of the country's independence, a fact which actually is seen as a negative for the PNM by some of its critics in the private space, private citizens. Coming out of this election, the PNM had to take a cold hard look at itself, but its own internal issues, which in part could probably be traced back to the actions of Dr. Keith Rowley under Mr. Manning, which led to that snap election, ironically, which led to the Prime Minister Kamala Persaud-Bissessa's first term in office. The PNM was left as a party with a lot of, from the outside looking in, if not a lot, then enough internal division that it caused their post-election appearances and utterances to be less than impressive, because they were so busy jockeying for position, it seems, amongst themselves, they didn't realize how it was coming across to the rest of the country. And more importantly, the recent history was not something after losing an election that you could point to as a positive. You were voted out. That, at the very least, I think is something that not a lot of people will dispute. The voting numbers came down, so you could have a debate on the level of support for the Kamala Persaud-Bissessa government, what they got, right? Was it a clear mandate? Because on some level, the actual number of votes wasn't that much higher than what the PNM got when they won the last time. The difference is the PNM support bottomed out, dropped out. They got abandoned by a significant chunk of the voters that voted for them in the election before. So that's why I say, I don't think you could dispute they were voted out. When you're voted out, you can't stand by your recent history and say, look how much good we did. Because it was assessed by the public to be literally not good enough. More to the point, there was a perception of the UNC not being ready for a general election at one point in time. And now the question remains for the general public in this last election. I do believe to some extent the UNC did improve their messaging, did improve their public campaigning for the election. They looked the best on the campaign trail and a couple of months after. That's when they looked the best, they sounded the best, they sounded the most professional. So to what extent did they pull themselves or prove their detractors wrong And to what extent, however, was it that, well, it's not so much that the UNC leveled up, but the PNM just fell so far that they were no longer viable in the minds of enough voters. So, I say all that to now come to the point that excluding Dr. Rowley is an interesting situation. I hesitate to even call it a decision because there's a he said, she said, right? Publicly, they're saying he was invited. Publicly, he's saying he was not. I think whoever, now maybe it's somewhere in the middle and there was something lost in translation. Somebody didn't do their job and the intentions were to invite him, but he didn't get the message, he didn't get the letter, whatever. That's the only thing that makes sense to me, because to say that one side or the other is going to outright lie about it, that would be dumb. But then again, I would not put it past the possibility for somebody to decide to do a dumb thing. The question is who. But look now, let's disregard how we got here. Look at what happened. The former leader of the PNM feels like he's on the outside looking in. Let's ask the question, is that the case? Is that a good thing or a bad thing? Well, I think one could potentially see where it is something to be considered by the PNM if they want to move on from that election defeat. But that is a very, very loaded concept, because there are still members on the PNM right now, senior members of the PNM, who for all intents and purposes were part of Dr. Heath Rowley's side of the equation. The most notable name, of course, being Stuart Young. How much is his political career tied to Dr. Heath Rowley? He would not be the first person who might want to divest himself of a relationship with a political senior. Many of Mr. Manning's supporters, well, maybe I shouldn't say many, but there are some notable Manning supporters after the snap election that he called and the defeat of the PNM, essentially abandoned him and, in one case reportedly, led the Spanish Inquisition to indict him, to condemn him, and to remove him. Politics, when played in an ugly way, is an ugly game. And as I said, a lot of what we see now, it could probably be traced back all the way to 2010 or 2009, 2008, where the internal power struggle started to leach out into the public space, into the public record, into some extent public policy. And that exposure did not make the entity that is the PNM look better, and it led to a defeat. But then perhaps the lessons weren't learned then, and they have to be learned now. I keep saying it's not enough for one party to justify its actions based on, well, the other side did it, so we could do it too. Well, if that's what we want to have voted the other side out. There are those who say we don't really vote people in. We vote people out. And then in the case where you get a second term, it's because we keep the other side out, I would imagine. I honestly, and even Dr. Sheikh Mohammed did not want to agree with this, because he doesn't necessarily want to think of how bad it could get. He doesn't believe that the PNM, such a monolith of our political history, will allow itself to fall this far. But I honestly thought that if that party did not learn its lessons, this could have been the beginning of the end. Now, it is a shame because I'm not necessarily advocating that the party abandon Dr. Heath Rowley, try to scrub his name from the history books. disassociate itself with him as much as possible and vilify him. Because that is essentially a version of what you see governments of this country do, which is tell you who to blame for it rather than taking accountability and responsibility for their own mistakes and their own failings. And at this point, yes, on some level, perhaps maybe conversations should be had with Dr. Keith Rowley. Look, at the end of the day, that last election was, to some extent, a public consensus on you and your leadership. You wanted to put Stuart Young as political leader. You set up this whole scenario. It was your administration's track record that informed the public on the potential future possibilities and potential of a Stuart Young-led administration, and they didn't necessarily like that potential, even though it was not a proven situation where you had something to look at. This is what it actually would be. People didn't want to take that chance. That technically is because of the types of decisions that they disagreed with that came from your administration. So maybe, even if a broken clock is right twice a day, I said that yesterday when speaking about Dr. Keith Rowley's statements, that might be true, but maybe at the end of the day, unfortunately, as much as I disagree with the don't blame the messenger, don't judge a message by the messenger as well, what is the merits of what is being said, that's what we should do, but I have to acknowledge the practical reality of if the public is not willing to listen, maybe you should not speak. And what is the use of speaking to the PNM's base? One, they already support your party, and two, you're retired. So why would it be necessary for you to speak to the base? And also, one of the situations, and again, I'm not saying that the Penelope Beckles-led PNM purposefully blanked Dr. Keith Rowley. But one of the consequences of how this situation ended up, or maybe not the consequences, one of the things that should have been looked at if everything was copacetic, is that what makes it harder for Penelope Beckles to fully assume leadership of the PNM is if the former leader is hovering in a manner that at times could undermine whatever direction she's trying to steer the ship towards. Especially if it is giving of his opinions without consultation. Because at the end of the day, human beings will have human feelings, and one of the things, one human feeling is letting go. And you might think, oh, politicians, they're not going to do that. They're not going to do something silly like that. No, our politicians are very human because we tend to not reward based on merit. It's a popularity contest. Our politics is based around charisma. And you could be very charismatic. That doesn't mean that you're going to necessarily have other exceptional qualities in terms of judgment and patience. What will be interesting is to see exactly what the PNM does moving forward. Because like I said, not every citizen in the country views the majority rule 62 years of the PNM as a positive. And also, at the end of the day, as I've been pointing to, they want to see something else. This will only work, PNM to some extent maintaining their status quo, if the government falls even lower. And then we will get another election of voting out the UNC. And the PNM, unless there's a new challenger, will win by default. And that is why the question was asked, I believe 2 weeks ago with Karen, is that a viable alternative? Would we be better off under the PNM in that scenario as opposed to the UNC? Or will it just be who lost the popularity contest that election? But in reality, They make too many of the same mistakes. They have too many of the same failings. PNM is viewed as less corrupt. They raise the price of gas. We ain't right yet. Well, the current government raised the price of alcohol. We ain't right yet either. It's not about that I want to see one party win over the other, but what I would like to see is the parties compete against each other in smart ways. The UNC is in government now. What should be the PNM's job? Not to make the UNC look as bad as possible every chance they get. Yes, I understand negativity sells and goes viral and it invokes strong emotions. But at some point, when will we stop allowing ourselves to be fooled by negative press? The government is also trying to use negative press, targeted statements towards the opposition to undermine any opposition's arguments or talking points. But that's not a debate. When will one side try the concept, the seemingly advanced tactic, as difficult and complex as it may be, and on some level perhaps it is more complex, of merely being actually not just less corrupt, but significantly less corrupt, more professional, exercise better judgment, willingness to communicate with the public more diligently and dutifully, be better than the other guy, and you win not because the other one was voted out, but because you were deemed as superior, so you were voted in. The TPP was voted in. I would imagine you don't get to a landslide like that. There are other regional leaders who were voted in, and their political opponents were essentially blanked. For better or worse, that's how they were perceived by the public, so superior compared to their foes. But that's not how we do things here in TNT. Because as time moved on, we have allowed ourselves to continue making essentially the same mistakes with each election cycle. And some would argue that where we've reached, the ones who don't necessarily like the history, they've said it on this show before, it starts all the way with Eric Williams. It starts all the way at the beginning of the PNM. It starts all the way when certain things were allowed to happen and the public tolerated it. Because that's why now you have Michaela Pandey calling for campaign finance reform. Now, as an outsider looking in, to what extent her words are going to carry enough weight to move the needle and actually get the politicians moving on this? It's doubtful that she has any weight on this matter. But this is something that we get a little bit of lip service every now and then, usually from the opposition party of the day. It's something that on the surface, you would see a lot of politicians kind of politely agreeing to, never really advancing the discussion. And you never see a government actually make a good faith attempt in order to do this. The PNM is viewed as less corrupt. The Prime Minister said, hey, they profit off of crime. The interesting thing about the less corrupt statement is the implication is both parties are still corrupt though. For one to be less corrupt than the other, but still corrupt, both parties have to be corrupt. To what extent do both parties engage with the criminal element? The PNM tried to say, hey, a lot of their campaign finance comes from crime. That is a speculation from the PNM side that I've heard from since the partnership when the OPVs were cancelled. How many defense lawyers are in the UNC? Look, one is the Minister of Defense right now. More on him later. it seems as though no one wants campaign finance reform, as opposed to Tobago autonomy, where both parties tried to campaign on Tobago autonomy, where neither side could give a clear definition on Tobago autonomy, despite the fact that it's been consulted to death. But at the very least, the difference between Tobago autonomy and campaign finance reform is there is some level of public demand for it. But we don't have that for campaign finance reform here. We tolerate whatever foolishness is going on. We don't even know for sure what it is because we don't care enough to even demand it being looked into. And to some extent, the politicians don't have to report to us about these matters. The financiers, we view the term financiers, party financiers, as a negative. It is utilized by the politicians themselves as a negative when speaking about the other side. And yet, as a country, there is too little. You might be saying that you call for it. It's not enough. There's too little demand, public demand for campaign finance reform. Because in a world where our politicians are good at their job, there are two parties and they will do the math real quick and say, the first side that figures out how to meet the demand of the public, whether you actually solve the problem for the public or you give them some kind of smoke screen, but the first party to satisfy the public will come out ahead. But we don't even see that. We don't even see a bad faith attempt to placate us, really, with regards to campaign finance reform. We all view politicians as corrupt. I don't think you could speak to anybody in the middle that is 100% confident one political party is not corrupt. Doesn't matter which one. Don't care. You could either one, all, right? But yet, we believe all politicians are corrupt. We complain about them all the time. But then we expect them to solve all of our problems, and we don't actually want to demand any real levels of accountability from them. We only want to use those concepts to attack the political side that we're against. That's it. That's not the politicians that figure out. That's their supporters. Their supporters pull their wool over their eyes for their own side, and everything under the sun is thrown at the other side. That's why the calls of bringing the country together after the election did not last very long. That's why the crime talks that the president called for, asked for, never went anywhere. That's why every election, it seems as though we're just trading heads for tails. Ketchup for mustard, mustard for ketchup. Dare I ask, what point in time of history can you definitively say we were better off? Because if you want to tell me under the UNC we were better off, I would argue, were we really better off? Or did we just see, we saw change, we saw money spent, but were we better off? In the long run, there's a reason why crime kept getting worse. And there's a reason why our economic position did not improve after a point in time, and why our education system has now reached the point of near failure, and our social security programs and pension and the like are also on the cusp of failure. It's because nobody thought long term all this time. Long term doesn't get you re-elected. Short term does. So reform, you have to demand it. You can't just expect that at some point they'll come around to do it. Why should they change? They like it so. And as far as they're aware, we like it so. Let's take a break. And we'll welcome our guests this morning. Stay tuned. This is Dr. Ebana WSN, the Content Capital Show. Michael Small. I'll be right back with Ashraf Ali for you after this.
Hi, I am Emiliana Beechan, and I am a mental health and conflict resolution consultant. Welcome to Mind Matters, the show where we explore the intricate world of mental health and the art of conflict resolution. Join us as we hear from mental health professionals, conflict resolution experts, and everyday people who have transformed their lives through understanding and communication. Mind Matters, WESN Content Capital.
So once your sugar is not controlled, it causes changes in the blood vessels in the back of your eyes. It basically makes your blood vessels more leaky. And it happens on a stage process where the smaller molecules start to leak, then the intermediate, and then the larger ones. Larger means we have come to a bleed.
You are watching Strictly Legal on WESN Content Capital. Just give an overview of what exactly is that split arrangement.
Nah, you don't need to register nothing. You don't need, we can do that another time. But then it becomes a hit, and then everybody starts to want to claim.
The laws that predate many of the independent countries' constitutions are going to be those colonial laws.
We know there are an infinite amount of circumstances that would lead to a murder.
I have a great idea and I have a great concept, but until it's actually expressed, it does not become intellectual property.
Accomplishments or targets of a forensic accountant is to quantify what may have been lost.
We believe we defend criminals and we manipulated the law and we exploited the system.
A responsible journalist will reach out to the person who they have the information on for a comment.
Knowing how to tell authentic is as easy as 1, 2, 3. Find it, match it, search it. Step 1. Find the style number on the tag. Step 2. Match the style number inside the jersey with the number on the tag. Step 3. Search it. A quick Google search of the style number will verify the jersey is authentic when the search results match the jersey being searched. Don't be fooled by counterfeit jerseys. Before you buy, remember to find it, match it, search it.
Fan Zone, 2 locations nationwide. Center City Mall, Chaguanas and Movie Town, Port of Spain. Nationwide delivery available.
Maybe he landed here totally by coincidence. But if by chance he's admiring your fresh coat of Benjamin Moore soft sky blue, well, that's a pretty high compliment. Coming from an expert.
Take some time for yourself or spend some time with the family at Sandy Point Village Hotel. Enjoy our various studio and suite apartments, self-contained with their own kitchenettes and Wi-Fi. We also have our famous 100-foot swimming pool and our beachfront restaurant, the Steak and Lobster Grill. And our location in Crown Point puts us near the center of activity from the nylon pool to the local nightlife. Call us and make your reservations at 639-8533, 389-2378, or email us at sandypointvillagehotel@gmail.com.
This is 10 questions. I'm Andy Johnson. The distance from where we should be in the world in going forward on our commitments with climate change.
The effects of climate change that cannot be accounted for, it's called loss and damage, and we're seeing loss and damage happening so much more in this decade and the previous decade.
The principal term there was this question of the correspondent banking issues.
That is why we're trying to build capacity with this country here, Trinidad and Tobago, and other countries in the region.
Man is not showing any signs of stopping or even slowing down. More than half of the forest in Trinidad is already gone.
All the plants and all the animals and all of the nice clean water and fresh air and everything had to be on this planet for humanity to have a chance.
We have small change when it comes to countries that can take decisions, and when they speak, the world listens.
The General Assembly is a very democratic forum. And Trinidad and Tobago has the same vote as Canada, in spite of the obvious difference in size.
I'm back here and talking about the WESN, the Connicato Show. Michael Small joined once again. Yes, I know it's not Friday because tomorrow's a holiday. So because of that, we pushed up his appearance. Speaking, of course, about Ashraf Ali, whose knowledge and expertise, of course, these days seems to be more pertinent than ever because we are in our, to some extent, depending on how you count it, fourth SOE in just a little over 1 year, which I'm still kind of besides myself when I think about it. Ashraf, good morning.
Good morning, Sean. How are you?
Fourth SOE. But one of the odd things is it really does not feel like an SOE.
Well,
and in part because perhaps, you know, like when an IP is overexposed in media, like how many Fast and Furious movies could they make before, you know, we've had enough?
You've had enough.
So how many SOEs are we going to have before all of a sudden it's not going to be an emergency? An emergency is like something that's special, right?
I think the next two series, SOE 3 and 4, I think we done pass already. The ones that we don't need to say anymore. Because from the beginning, there has been no significant change in the way the SOEs were operating. Yes, there was some statistical data that showed that there was a decrease in crime, in certain types of crimes. So if it is that you are saying the SOE, intention of the SOE was not based on dealing with a particular threat where it was expressed that the SOE was for, but we're talking about reduce in some serious crimes and violent crimes. The narrative of what the SOE was about, as opposed to what they're speaking about at the end. Yes, I could understand. Okay, we had some, we had the statistics of crime is dropping. So is it that they're going to say now? So the SOE now is a tool to reduce crime, and SOE can never be a tool to reduce crime, and should never use in that manner to reduce crime.
Well, in the sense of anything that might be seen as a reduction isn't going to be permanent, because it does suppress crime, at least to some extent.
And that would be a natural, that should be a natural phenomena with a SOE for reduction of crimes. And I'm saying that is not crime, that is not policing or crime fighting.
Right.
The mere fact that you have a state of emergency, where you give the police some additional powers, that additional powers will automatically should automatically relate to a crime, a reduction in crime. It has been seen historically after the three SOEs thus far, you saw the reduction in crime. So I am saying it operated in the context of how it's supposed to operate. And so that's what I'm saying. A SOE, when you look at what a state of emergency means, the word state of emergency means that you put a state of emergency, put a country on a state of emergency. If there is a major disaster, some critical or imminent threat to public safety and security, and like in COVID when we had a health issue.
Right.
Right. But when you talk about an imminent threat, and I want to use that word imminent threat to national security and national security apparatus, and I'm simply saying that, could we say today, or is there any information that was shared with the public, right, that threat was averted? Do we know what the threat was? To say that, listen, the reason why all of that we had a state of emergency is because of this particular threat. And I'm simply saying, what was the threat? What was the significance of the threat? I am not asking for, I don't think the public wants a big explanation of all the details. But hey, if there was an immediate threat to the lives of individuals, then should the country not be, should law-abiding citizens and the criminal elements be interrupted differently?
Well, so you bring up something interesting here, because it's starting to make me go back to the states of emergencies we've had in my living memory, because I can't remember one before 2011, right? I'll never forget, I was in Tobago in some little half-broken down TV in an office watching that announcement thinking, well, my life just got more complicated, as I'm sure everybody did, because one of the things that came out of that was a curfew. But the reason for that state of emergency was a threat to the government. Now, I have acknowledged that technically speaking, if you potentially prevent that type of threat, the public might not actually see what it is, right? Or there's a threat against the government, but we don't actually see anything happen. We might not necessarily then know exactly what is the length and breadth, in part because they're not necessarily going to tell us.
Yes.
And to be fair, it's one thing to have like information on a potential threat. You're not necessarily going to know for sure, even from law enforcement perspective, the length and breadth of what's going to happen, unless it happens. And we don't want it to happen. However, 2011, threat against the government. Now, this might be a coincidence, but it was a Kamala Persad-Bissessar-led government in 2011. Then we come now to the last few months of the PNM administration. For that year of, I believe, 2024, at some point in that year, the opposition UNC, led by Kamala Persad-Bissessar, was calling for an SOE to deal with crime. Right? Stick a pin on that. Then eventually, right at the tail end of 2024, PNM calls an SOE. Right? We do see a reduction in the murder rates. My fear is the reduction, of course, is temporary, but it somehow manages to hold beyond the election. Then, of course, the new government comes in. They call an SOE. This time, it's not the prime minister or the minister, and this is after the opposition complained that Dr. Thrawley wasn't there at the press conference for the PNM's SOE. This time, it's the Commissioner of Police, and he informs the country that there was a threat against the government. The second Kamala Persad-Bissessar government, the second Kamala Persad-Bissessar government's SOE, the second threat against the government. But we're willing to believe that, in part because you see what transnational crime could do in other parts of the world. Then they renew it to suppress crime. And let's not forget, they asked the PNM to call an SOE to suppress crime the year before. Then we have this SOE, we need to suppress crime, and there's a threat against the government. This is in their press release on the state of emergency. I can't remember if the AG brought this up in his one media house press conference that did not exclude the media because they had state media house. That's a whole other issue. But now I'm left to wonder, this is the third time a Kamala Persad-Bissessar government is saying there's a threat against the government. All of the SOE debates is to stop the murders, though. To what extent now are we going to get, is it a cry wolf situation where we're going to be desensitized to the whole threat against the government thing, and there's going to be a backlash where the public's going to say, we don't believe that nonsense anymore?
No.
And I'm not saying that there isn't a threat, you know,
No,
but it's just the public might perceive it to be.
That is what I'm saying. If you are saying that there is a threat against a government, that's a serious threat. That's, you're going down you're going down a narrative of something not similar to, but along the lines of the 1990.
Yeah.
Right? So I could put all that in the same the same category, but at different tiers, right? It might be, the threat might not be as serious as what took place in 1990, right? But it is serious enough to be placed in the category of threats against the government. If there's a threat against the government, I am saying the population of Trinidad and Tobago, the citizenry of Trinidad and Tobago must be placed in the feel the presence of what that threat is about. You must not be able to have free movement. Everyone mustn't have free movement because it's a threat not only UNC administration, you know.
Yes.
We're talking the threat on the government of Trinidad and Tobago and state entities and officials. That is a serious threat.
Including I believe it was either stated or assumed people like prosecutors and judges because a prosecutor was killed.
That's a serious threat. That's a threat on your democracy. Those are serious threats that any country that has intelligence that indicates that there are individuals who are trying, who want to put our democracy to that and have threats against officials of those high officials in the country. You cannot have free movement of anybody because every and anyone has to be, the country has to go in a state of, should have gone into a state of, the state of emergency should have included curfews because those are critical threats. Those are serious threats we're talking about. No, extend to now.
So then, let me just ask this. Is that a potential sign? Like, we see the potential. This is what the transnational cartels do in Latin America. They do attack judges and prosecutors and policemen and like, right? It just happened in Mexico. They got a cartel leader, so 20-something police officers were attacked by cartel soldiers and killed in Mexico. And we see our porous borders. We do have some amount of criminals coming from South America among sides, the immigrants and the like. We do have high-powered weapons, some of which were confiscated that we haven't seen any commission of crimes. Those high-powered rifles that potentially could threaten, you know, more than. Let me not go there. Let me not go there. Right? To what extent, though, we see yes, it's a reasonable concern, but since they can't show us anything, why should we believe that there was a threat? And really, all of the states of emergencies was just to try to keep the murder rate down.
And there lies the problem where persons will drop their guard, citizens dropping their guard because the citizen is not going to, doesn't want to believe that the threat exists because there's not sufficient information or sufficient movements by the law enforcement personnel. For persons to say, listen, those threats were really real. Look at the type of activities that are taking place. Look how we are being affected by that threat. Now, yes, I can understand you don't want to interfere with the actual runnings of the country because we are in financial issues, so you don't want to cause more financial problems than that is necessary. But at the same time, I cannot say I've seen any significant or any impact with law enforcement operating any differently as to how they operate, how they should operate. We're in a state of emergency, but business as usual?
Well, so I want to advance the conversation just a little bit, right? And this is part of why I'm starting to think more now, not necessarily closing the book on a threat against the government, but maybe the nature of it might not have been properly explained and the persistence of it might not be quite what we think it is, right? Maybe it's more like an overarching general sense of risk as opposed to a specific threat. But there's more we could say about that. But I want to go back. I showed this clip on Tuesday. I want to go back to the Minister of Defense's words. There are about 3 different points from his statements, 2 of which, at the very least, are pertinent directly to the discussion. One might be indirectly still significant when assessing the situation. So Ashraf could see the clip, and for the rest of you, it's time to cue this.
And you know, the thing is, Dana Sitahal also knew she was going to get killed. She knew. Yes, she did. She chose not to have security around her. And she went on. And there was, well, if you are in the case, you would hear about the intercepts. There are intercepts. So the police is there listening, knowing that a high-profile prosecutor is going to be killed, and instead of doing what we did, you know what they did? They listened, and they listened, and they listened, and now she's not here. That's what they do. You know what they do? Nothing. What they do and nothing is the same thing. That's the PNM fail. So they cannot come here, and he didn't try. You cannot come here and tell us what to do, what new crime plan. And yes, you know, the thing is, an SOE is not a crime plan, and we never said it was. But if it is necessary to preserve life, we'll do it again and again and again.
So that last part, there's actually 2 things you could get out of it. One, an SOE is not a crime plan. Despite the fact that myself and I believe others are saying, well, an SOE is a Band-Aid, right? Especially if they use it like you have from the very beginning, from the PNM's SOE, pointed to the lack of a curfew, pointed to the missed opportunities, and it's almost ridiculous how literally every time it comes up, you can make the same point over and over and over, because they institute this watered down thing. Is it really an emergency if it's so watered down? And there's nothing corresponding to it to affect anything beyond, well, we have special powers, so we can lock people up without necessarily proving anything.
One of the statements that came out that I picked up there is that when the minister indicated that this is not a crime plan, but any measure that will be utilized to save lives, we will continue to do it over and over and over again. Right? That is significant. You know why? Because at the end of 2024, when they instituted the SOE, it was because of violent crimes and saving lives.
Yeah.
That was the narrative.
Yeah, I mean, that's what the opposition UNC called for, basically, for the whole year, and the PNM put into place.
PNM put that in place, and they said that was because of the information they had, where we have potential violence on the street and bloodshed could be shed, lives would be saved, and SOE was implemented. So in that light, the PNM, the UNC did the same. So I don't see the issue right now where both of them will be arguing, where the opposition now should be arguing why you have a SOE. They went on the same. They use the same measuring sticks to use.
I will say this. I think the PNM was very reluctant to put an SOE in place, in part because of what you said. They didn't want a curfew. They didn't want to impact the country. We saw what happened in 2011. So they tried this thing with a curfew-less SOE.
But the problem they was trying is that they're trying the SOE, but then they had the issue where they had instability in the administration of the Trinidad and Tobago Police Service. There was no structure in terms of there was no structure in terms of who was the actual commissioner to lead the organization. There's a big difference now. There is a commissioner and an executive that is not going to change, right? There has been appointed, right? So there is a commissioner and there is an executive. So there must be directives and directions when in terms of stability of the organization and the policies to put in place to deal with crime fighting. I am simply saying that we are, even though we have a commissioner, appointed commissioner and executive, we are still using the same methodologies without a commissioner of police when we had acting commissioners.
Yeah.
So my thing about it is that I am simply saying this. if we have a state of emergency, I do not need to know all the information, but I want to feel the seriousness of the state of emergency. I want to be able to feel that, listen to me, my movements should not be allowed on a regular basis because we have a state of emergency, and the seriousness of the state of emergency, our democracy and our institutions are being threatened by the criminal elements. And if that is the case, I am saying we need to, the citizens must feel that, listen to me, it is not just a talk.
Business as usual,
Business as usual.
empty talk.
Right? It is serious business we're talking about.
But consider this. Now, I will not fault the opposition because we've had 3 bites at this apple.
Yes.
So the 4th time now, if you want to debate the point, having a state of emergency is not the issue. It's what you do with it, right? But consider this. Not only does it seem now, 4th time going around with the benefit of hindsight, that all of the state of emergencies really were just about violent crime. The commissioner having an intelligence background and what he may or may not have seen to prompt the first time he announced a state of emergency, notwithstanding. Reduction of violent crime seems to be the real overarching political motivation for these SOEs, right? Both parties did it. Both parties also had a clause that caused certain members of the public to kind of raise their eyebrow with regards to the PNM having one that spoke to public order, and
Yes.
that didn't survive the courts, right? Anything that disrupted public order. Whereas this one now, they were a little bit more specific with public safety. Now, at the end of the day, it still comes across as trying to, or not necessarily intentionally, all right? If you want to say it's not intentional, that's fine. But unintentionally, at the very least, it encroaching on things like censorship and the like. I am looking at these things are not that dissimilar. The approaches are not that dissimilar. The criticisms of what are you doing with the SOE could be applied to both parties' attempts at an SOE. And which is why I have that question there on the screen. Because now I'm wondering, right? Because as you pointed out, it's not fair to just say, well, what the UNC is doing is all wrong. Because no, to some extent, not only did the PNM do it, they were the ones that set the precedent. Oh, well, you know, you could have an SOE without a curfew. They set that precedent. And they were reluctant to do it. They only did it at the tail end of their time in office, right? Despite the fact that there were people calling for it. I believe it's not just the opposition UNC that was calling for it. I wonder if there's something systemic in our criminal justice system and our society, right, that is causing us to be in a situation, because the minister basically indirectly admitted there is no crime plan, right? Because the only thing we've seen on crime outside of stand your ground laws, and you can't tell me stand your ground laws is a crime plan. You define yourself, that's our crime for plan. That is a criticism that has been leveled at the government. But the only other thing we've seen is the SOEs. So if an SOE is not a crime plan, and that's all we've seen coming from their cabinet or their legislative body, they don't have a crime plan, right? And what was the lament of the PNM administration with Minister of Security Fitzgerald Hines? I don't have a crime plan. So neither, we're in the same boat. Is it systemic? Do you think I'm correct on that?
So I would say in this context, it would have been now, in hindsight, I think persons should apologize to the former commissioner of police.
Which one?
Ulla Christopher. Right? Because everybody said that she did not have a crime plan. So is it that what she was doing, what the Trinidad and Tobago Police Service was doing then and doing now is not the same?
Well, that's the other point.
So when we come and criticize the leadership of an organization and say that they don't have this and they don't have that, all I'm simply pointing out that we keep pointing the fingers in one direction, not understanding that when you keep pointing the fingers in one direction, we're missing the objective. The objective is that we don't have a proper systematic crime plan to address the SOE, the crime holistically. What we have is an SOE for suppression. There's only so much you could suppress. Right?
Because we still have 300 meters.
So then at what point in time are we going to be comfortable? Are we saying now that, listen, we're comfortable at this point in time with not 600, 400, but we are comfortable with 600, with 300 or 400 lives lost in a year, violently or not. So we are saying, listen, we're comfortable with that now. That will we reach, because hey, we're better off with last year. It'll be better off the last year, and because last year had 500.
Do you think the population actually might not realize that they're doing it, but they might be thinking that?
And this is where we are, and unfortunately, this is where we have been going to. And it's something that I have been saying at what point in time where we're going to be comfortable with a figure. What figure are we comfortable with? Or I'm not sure the word comfortable, be acceptable enough to say, listen to me, we could relatively work with it, because things not as bad as it is. Not as bad. One life is more than is our murder rate per capita is not something we could be proud of, you know. Right? Violent crimes. We are in a state of emergency. We still have homicides taking place. We have robberies taking place. We have home invasions taking place. Recently we had a defense force officer get killed.
With allegedly national security ammunition.
Right.
I think it's both Coast Guard and Defense Force.
Right, under Defense Force umbrella. Those, I'm saying, when you look at it from a different perspective, Sean, some of the narratives where a state of emergency was implemented, threat to public safety and security, it has some significant points. So I am saying, if those things have significant points, and it was the information, the intelligence may be real, is good, right? They cannot inform the public as to the nature of intelligence, because it could compromise certain type of activities.
Fine, I understand that, but
the public, I am saying, the entire public, citizens of Trinidad and Tobago, cannot, both criminal and law-abiding citizens, for those who are considered as law-abiding citizens, right, cannot be allowed to move freely in this country when we are saying that we have a public safety an issue.
Unless the threat is more smoke and less fire.
I don't think the threat is more smoke. I am believing that they're trying to have a balancing act. Right? But at the same time, the SOE cannot afford a balancing act, because it only can go for 6 months.
Well, it could go for longer, but you know, the government tried one way to circumvent it, and that failed. Circumvented it another way.
After 6 months, the entire parliament had to support it.
Right, unless you let it go for about a month or a few weeks and then come back, because that's what we did.
But
consider this with that murder of the soldier. Ordinarily, if everything is working properly, if you see Defense Force bullets in the murder of anybody, if everything is working as it should, the first thing you then ask is, who in the Defense Force committed this murder? But we have allowed the situation deteriorate so badly. We don't know if it was a Defense Force member or if it was a criminal who got his hands on Defense Force.
And it would be irresponsible to suggest immediately that it's a Defense Force, because we don't know. But because of the same thing that you talk about.
But here's the problem. We unwittingly, this is what maybe no one intends to be this way, but think about it. Our society has not been up in arms over the fact that the Coast Guard has the borders wide open, and the Defense Force is losing ammunition which is being used in violent crime, and no one has been held accountable for these things, at least as far as the public is aware. And this is something the public should be made aware of, because these are matters of public interest. So I just think the lack of response and accountability, and the response to the lack of accountability, is, when I say it out loud and I think about it, it is shocking to me. We have Diego Martin in line, so we take the call. Good morning, you're on the air.
Good morning, Sean, and good morning to the ESP. I still calling him ESP. And we're talking about a crime plan. But let us be honest ourselves. The chief organization to help mitigate crime is the TTPS. Their motto is protect and serve with pride. let's go back to the history of how complicit this organization has. And the effort, I don't know there was any genuine effort by the officers in the TTPS themselves to get rid, to do the corrective and prevention action, so a person like me, an ordinary citizen, will have confidence in the police service. Let us reflect on the Garvin Scott drug report. In that report, people have to understand, in that report, a lot of policemen came forward secretly and said the TTPS was corrupt. 53 of them were suspended. They came back after a while and they were promoted, catapulted. You know why no evidence was given to prosecutors 53? From my vantage, the rest of the officers within there might have been afraid. The names what were held in the report said the names who gave evidence against officers were held because of security reasons and because it might have led to a lot of nefarious activities within the organization itself. We continue to have kidnapping. And one of most egregious action was the Nat brothers. Understand what the Nat brothers was when they were think. Your officer will understand that an alleged ACP was fingered in that with respect to the ransom money. That's a senior police officer in this, you know. When it was investigated through the Joint Select Committee, the chairman of the police commissioner of the police commission was castigated for his ineffective in pushing the commissioner of police to discipline those errant officers. Nothing happened again. So the TTPS, their culture of covering up alleged nefarious acts, malicious prosecution has continued. My whole issue about it, the TTPS being the main architect of protected and services pride, has to be fixed. The human resource must be chosen right. We have seen where judgment left, right, and center. I don't know if they even fix it. The one about promotion of ASP, the one about the glitch in constables to corporal. All of those are the making of a dysfunctional and collapsing TTP. If we could get them right with officers with integrity, honestly, then we could start say we could get it right. Fix the police first, and at the same time, fix the judiciary. We know we have issues in the judiciary. We know we have issues with the DPP. Those are the things we have to fix to move forward. I'm going to have a nice morning.
Thank you, caller. I was getting to that. But before we get to potentially some of these solutions, that was one of my issues. Yes, we have a new commissioner, but it doesn't really feel as though we have a significant enough improvement in job performance, because even under acting Junior Benjamin, we had a reduction in the murder rate from the very beginning. Now, was that because of whatever the police put in place then at the beginning of 2025, or was it just because the nature of the SOE just automatically gives us a reduction in murder rate? But the new commissioner, I haven't seen the police really change anything with regards to how they operate. So why are we going to assume improvement in the situation? We have Clarkson Bay line. We'll take the call quick. Clarkson Bay, good morning. You're on here.
Yeah. Hi.
Go ahead, caller. You're on here. Mute the TV.
Yeah. Hi. Good morning. To the officer there.
Morning.
Right. We have this SOE on and on and on. No, I don't like it, and I don't mind. If it's working, it will be good for the country. But it can't work when we have people in position who we're not going after. Who the officer right there know, you know. don't feel they doesn't know. They know that because when we talk about drugs, $700 million worth of drugs, cocaine, marijuana, guns, it ain't no poor person bringing in these things. And only forever, I mean, I'm kicking down the poor man house in the squatting area, wherever he live, only licking down his door. What he could have? He bringing in no containers. He bringing in, he's not a business person. So only very well know that only just doing things the wrong way. There are people you, the officer, might be protecting. There are people who Sean and all might be protecting because none of them don't want to talk about these things. And when these things do happen, you could only hear investigation is taking place and nothing never come out. Years upon years, we can't hear nothing. We had the judiciary problems. They cannot seem to give people the right justice. It comes like whenever you do something wrong, you will get right. You go before them. You go before them with something that is right, and you're getting wrong judgment. And I see that over and over because it had a girl right in Princeton. She was held with 7 kilos of cocaine. She went before the court, right? They went with the cocaine before the court, right? And they charged her 25,000. They didn't even charge her the worth of the cocaine. You understand? All because she didn't look like me. You understand? So all this kind of nonsense you have with the judiciary and all these entities. We have real problems in this country, and if we want to fix this country, we have to start dealing with it. If we don't deal with it, this country could only get worse. You understand? Because eventually people is going to rise up because they seeing the injustice. You understand? And we can't be doing injustice to poor people because that once you're doing that to poor people, which is the majority, they're going to get sense eventually and you can't control the crowd. So let me do it right now. Forget who look like who and who doing the wrong. If you look like the officer and you're doing wrong, you have to give account and you have to be held and bring them before the screen so we can know them. That is what we need to do. Thank you.
Thanks, Scholar. Here's the thing. For some people, calling out certain aspects of the criminal underworld is not something you do repeatedly because, well, there's a less than 20% murder detection rate, and I'll just leave that out there. Now, I'll say this. Governments, at least up until a point, I can't speak for the most recent iterations, but I imagine this to be true as well. Governments knew who was involved with crime, who were the major players, who were also members of high society. Politicians knew. They had the intelligence. One of the things that we see consistently is neither party is making any sorts of moves to go after anybody beyond street-level crime. All they care about, it seems to me, is suppressing the murders. There was no interdiction on the indices. There's not enough interdiction on illegal ports with regards to drug smuggling. So what are we supposed to make of that? The lack of results on the higher end areas are relatively consistent from administration to administration. Except the one exception, of course, is the Toll Shady case, which perhaps that was a matter of unique public interest and not just because he was involved in being a drug smuggler, drug dealer. But rather, it was a mass murder investigation. His underworld situation was secondary, I think, to the public interest of that case. We do have San Fernando line caller. Good morning, you're on the air.
Good morning, Sean.
Morning.
Good morning, Mr. Ali.
Morning.
Mr. Ali, I have to apologize up front for saying what I'm going to say, but I know you're getting beat up on this program.
I don't get beat up at all.
However, it is, as a police officer then, I'm going to put it that way, as a police officer. But Mr. Ali, and I listen to you say that the public need to feel the effects of the SOE by having a curfew. That don't make sense. The issue is not the public having to feel the inconvenience. The issue is that our crime fighting ability has reached its limit under the present system that we have. It has reached its limit. If you have to bring back-to-back curfews, okay, we could say we had an issue with the transition with Ms. Christopher and all of that, but we had a commission. There was a new commissioner put in place, and when he was put in place, he went to the National Security Council with information that prompted the state of emergency. However, it was not effective because, according to the Prime Minister, who went on international in a regional forum on international television and said the murder rate has fallen in Trinidad and Tobago because of the United States of America's military presence in the Caribbean Sea. So that the state of emergency didn't do anything to reduce the murder rate, according to the head of Trinidad and Tobago, the head of state.
Mrs. Navarro, she did also say government policy. She didn't directly state of emergency. So she left an open-ended statement with regards to that.
Yes, but she lead it out. She lead it out by saying U.S. presence.
Mm-hmm.
That's what she said. So she just for her to say that on that international forum belittles the effect of all the hard work that was done by the TTPS and the state of emergency. But I'm going back to say the present situation in Trinidad and Tobago with the TTPS and the crime fighting ability has reached its limit if we have to use a state of emergency back to back. It is no longer, as Prakash Ramadan said last week. He said it's reached a state where the criminals now saying state of emergency, so what? Those were his exact words. So what? And we've seen it right now. The crime plan was state of emergency, and the backup to that was zone of special operations. That was the crime plan. The TTPS has reached its limit under the present management, under the present way it operates. It is, and I'm not saying it's a easy thing, you know.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm.
The TTPS needs reforming. This not working anymore. But it is a difficult thing to do that while the country is in the state it is. But that is why Mr. Guevara getting the big box. That is why Mr. Sturge and Mr. Alexander getting the big box. They need to sit down together and come up with a plan to try and reform the TTPS while fighting crime. The two things can be done simultaneously. The two things can be done. I'm not saying that it's an easy job, but it can be done simultaneously. Because criminals is business as usual as far as they're concerned. Criminals seem to be adapting faster than the government can adapt and the protective services can adapt.
Mm-hmm.
This is no longer state of emergency is not working for Trinidad and Tobago. It's not working. We're seeing it right now. And but trying to tell me that you're going to have a curfew between 9 o'clock and 5 o'clock in the morning, that's going to help? That's not going to help. The country already have itself under curfew. I come out at night just to see what is happening. You can't know what happens if you don't come out. So I come out at night and drive around and see what's happening. People have already decided I ain't going out when it get too dark. There are businesses that now have started that were opening, started to close 8 o'clock in the night when they used to open at 9.
Mm-hmm.
Some of them closing at 7 because they have decided we're gonna put ourselves under our self-imposed curfew. This thing not working.
Okay.
And we need to come up with a plan. That should be the avenue of the discussion. What we think we can do to try and solve what's happening in this country? Because we are at the bottom. We already at the bottom. Have a good weekend, gentlemen.
Thank you, caller. Now, he did say the criminals say, so what, we're in a state of emergency. And on some level, that is one of the reasons why you said, there's another part to this, right? But having a curfew, it's not as easy for the criminals to say, so what? Because unlike the zones where they might be able to adjust away from the zones, the curfew will be national.
We keep saying that, what if you have a curfew from one time to the other, a specific time? And that's why I'm saying, I am not asking for curfews throughout the country. Good? Because having a curfew throughout the country is a lot more logistical challenges you're going to have because of, in COVID, there was some logistical challenges because persons have to move because of businesses and employment and all of that. It is going to cause some issues when it comes to that.
Night shifts and
So I am not asking for, we're not talking about this. I'm talking about you can have curfews imposed in certain areas where we consider already we have high crime areas. If you're talking about curfews, let me don't use the word curfews if persons don't like the word curfews. Restrictive movements, right? You have to restrict movements. You have to have a system in place to limit the movement of criminals in and out of their safe zones and to committing crimes in other areas because they're not committing crimes in their area alone, right? They are leaving and going to other areas, committing the crimes and coming back in as just normal. We just going out to do some job and come back in a business.
And I think one of the things I found very startling was when I read this morning or yesterday morning there was a home invasion or alleged attempted home invasion. It was only 2 individuals. One was a teenager. And I'm like, this is the first time I've seen a home invasion that didn't have 6 to 8 men.
So there is no plan that could cover all avenues, right? And I don't think there's going to be, you could get a plan that could look at every single issue.
So to explain, I think this is one of the things that the politicians, perhaps maybe they themselves don't even understand. It's similar with the judicial system. There comes a point where you can't increase it because the crime rate and the number of cases are going exponential, and you adding to the judges, you're not even doubling the judges at a time, right, to try to keep up. And I think it's the same thing with the police. Like, you can't just add more police, more police.
Let me give an example of something that was very worrying to me, and the irony behind it is that I saw a media brief where we're talking about the police is warning individuals about smoking cigarettes, marijuana, and electronic devices, cigarette devices in the public space. And if those persons under the
legal age,
the act, under the law,
yes,
you can be arrested and charged summarily. However, just remember, possession of marijuana was decriminalized to a certain amount. So 30 grams of marijuana is still, in fact, legal, but you to be in possession of, as well as smoking marijuana in a public space and smoking marijuana in a vehicle is still an offense, which is a ticketable offense. But up to this day, since the introduction of it, has anyone been arrested and been ticketed or been put before the court to address that particular issue? Is it going to change anything at all? So just, you come like, you just put out that narrative, and the public now is gone hype, because it's going to aggravate, the public is going to have some conflict now, because if an officer now tells you smoking a cigarette is an offense, that's an aggravated issue. You're going to have some conflict there now. So you're just going to increase the level of conflict that you don't want.
Between the police and the general population.
And general public. Because homicides are taking place, violent crimes are taking place, home invasions and other violent crimes taking place. But they are not on a priority thing, but you're coming to talk to a citizen about smoking a cigarette on the streets? Or I mean, yes, it's an offense, but...
No, wait, cigarettes or cigarettes with marijuana?
Cigarette we're talking about also.
Just cigarettes? Yes. Because where are you supposed to smoke? Not outside?
In public spaces. So in a public space, they say public space, working environment. And if you're smoking in your working environment, in a FET and all of these things, that the FET promoter, how are you going to tell me that... Does it make sense that we're going to put that out? This is just me, eh? How am I going to put this out? Because here's the challenge we continue facing here. We continue to face the issues that we're talking about, and the ones that the police seem to be directing all the resources about are the trivial offenses, such as how you use social media, how traffic offenses we're talking about.
Yeah, not speeding, but where you park wrong.
Right? Wrecking and these are some of the things I'm saying are minor offenses, but we have serious offenses taking place. Possession of firearms, shootings and woundings and homicides, home invasions, kidnappings. I am simply saying, when you're in the layman term, state of emergency, if you're on the other side of the law, you need to feel the burn. You need to feel that I am not supposed to be able to have free movement because I'm a criminal. I'm not supposed to be moving from point A to B. Yes, you may have in those communities or some areas where you have law-abiding citizens. They may be well appreciate a limited amount of movement by the criminal elements because they also could be they could be targeted at the same time, but they would not be inconvenienced.
So Mr. Samuel's point, it's not that you're saying curfews are going to solve all of this.
No, it's not going to solve it, and I agree with him.
It's one of the things that adds to the whole, well, why do the criminals not feel that we're in a state of emergency? Now, there's another point to that, and I think this is pertinent as well. I am starting to question the government's narrative of there's a threat against the government. Ashraf, I think, is basically, I'm not willing to discount that threat. But Mr. Sanfano had an interesting point on that. I'm not sure to what extent it was intentional when he said we have reached the limit of policing and the criminal justice system and crime fighting in the country, right? I think when you think about it, I should have gone further when I said, oh, well, we keep trying to suppress crime, but we're not doing anything to deal with crime in the long term. We're just suppressing the murder rate, but we're not actually going to keep it down. But consider this. This is now officially the second state of emergency 3-month period where the official reason is a threat against the government. The renewal, technically, as far as I remember, didn't state that. But my point is, shouldn't we also be using the state of emergency not just to make sure the murder rate reduction is permanent, but also to not just suppress the threat against the government, but try to go after the threat against the government? Because if we keep having a threat against the government, the state of emergency obviously is not being utilized to solve that as well, I think is negligence almost, because according to you, you're under threat. You're not trying to stop the threat permanently. You're just happy to try and keep it suppressed and hope it doesn't come to pass. Because if they don't feel anything from the state of emergency, at what point will the threat come through? Because you can't cover everything. We have Move on the line. Call of the morning. You're on here.
Good morning, Sean. Good morning, Mr. Ali.
Morning.
Mr. Ali, I want to be sure what it is you said just now. I'm a little bit confused. You are saying that the population would be aggravated if an officer arrests someone for smoking marijuana on the street.
Not marijuana.
Not marijuana.
Because that someone would feel
not marijuana.
That you're arresting me for smoking.
He said he was talking about he was talking about cigarettes.
They can have confront. So We all know that there are a number of persons that smoke cigarettes, right, caller? But the mere fact that you're dealing with the police officers are now going, there are some police officers may take this as an opportunity now to deal with the citizens and say, listen, smoking cigarettes or vaping in a public space is an offense. Yes, we know it's an offense. But we already have confrontations already and conflicts already brewing. And we see conflicts where persons believe trivial offenses such as traffic offenses already have confrontation. You're adding to the confrontational context when we're talking about smoking of cigarette in the public spaces. Yes, I understand the issue. It is against the law. So I'm not saying that enforcing the law is not the issue. I am saying that we're already in a situation where we have
low trust and confidence.
Low trust and confidence, and we already have conflicts. So I am simply saying that there is no need to add any situation that could aggravate or cause more conflicts when we are trying to get the citizens on the side of the law enforcement to help support in the crime fighting initiatives.
But Mr. Ali, and Sean, I don't know if you all, and I keep saying it whenever I call, but I don't know if you all realize. I understand what you said, yeah. But the only reason, in my opinion, that you have to say what you just said is because, and this is something we keep missing, we have, in the earlier part of our history, failed so miserably to enforce all laws that we have allowed that mindset to develop where now the population could even think of saying, well, why are you doing me this and you ain't going to do that for that? You see, everything starts somewhere. And at some stage, if we intend to go further and not end up like Haiti, we are going to have to understand that a signal must be sent to all citizens that all laws are going to be enforced. And we have to accept that. Otherwise, we're not going anywhere. You know? I understand what you said, but there has to be a time going forward that we, if we want to be a lawful, civilized place, the signal is going to have to be sent that all laws are going to be enforced at all times.
No, but I agree with you, Mova, but you have to be careful. You have to be careful because that you are saying all laws. Let us be realistic. All laws on the books of Trinidad and Tobago are not realistic in 2026. It may be okay. It was placed there for a particular purpose, and the same way we are saying that even that law itself outlived its purpose or is not relevant in our current society. So if you're saying enforcing all laws, so we have to be careful with it. So I am in agreement with you, and I always support you when you talk about enforcing laws. But sometimes we have to be reasonable whether or not that particular law, when it was intended, if it is fit for purpose at this point in time.
It's not just about if you have a vehicle, you have to maintain that vehicle. In the same way, if you have laws, you have to maintain your laws to the extent, just not enforcing, but you have to be from time to time, you have to look at the laws and make them relevant. We don't do that either. This is why we have this noise pollution problem, and I always have to go back to that. I don't know how many countries in the world, even during a state of emergency, the police could tell you that they can't deal with noise pollution. I mean, something is seriously wrong in this place. Something is seriously wrong in this place. You know, and no matter how you swing it, how you twist it, there has to be a time, you know, in this country where everybody will have to understand laws are there to be enforced. Otherwise, you must move them. So if you are saying there are some laws that are irrelevant, then there are what people getting paid for. There have to be people in this country whose job is to look at laws, make them relevant from time to time. Otherwise, they're not doing anything. You have the law there, you have a law there for hand, and nothing is being done. And John, and I wanted to raise this for Karen. Karen made a statement some months ago when she was on the show. She didn't actually say it, but she sort of implied that 5 years could never be enough for a murder case to be tried go through the whole, and I disagree with that totally. And she said it as if it was accepted.
What was the con?
Anyhow, that's my contribution. How about hello?
Do you remember why she said that? What she was speaking about in that situation?
I can't remember what was the.
Oh, okay. Oh, okay.
There was a time.
It could have been Pratt and Morgan caller, and I think she might not have been speaking that it is acceptable for a murder case to have to take more than 5 years. I think she was more saying, right now we can't get a murder case under 5 years, right? Without serious work to the criminal justice. But here's the thing, and I think this kind of ties together, because both, yes, the TTPS, but also criminal law needs serious reform and updating, right? The problem,
and as I said, Sean, there are people whose job should be to deal with that, but they're not working.
Well, no, basically.
And they're getting paid.
All right, thanks, caller. I was going to say the problem with enforcing all laws, that's a different statement to enforcing all reasonable laws, is that we haven't gone through the exercise, as you pointed out, to remove the unreasonable, unnecessary, impractical ones, right? So we still have the buggery law. Some people might say that's a fine law. That is not just limited to one sexual orientation. And more importantly, how are we supposed to enforce that anyway? Public acts are its own technical issue. You don't need this specific law to deal with that, right? And that's just one extreme, silly example. But that is an example I'm pretty sure that the police are saying, yeah, we're not trying to enforce that.
Well, let me make one much more simple and much more realistic. Street offenses. Vending on the sidewalk and on the pavements of any streets is an offense.
So this goes to my next point. In part, we don't enforce all of our laws because, and the caller is right, but I think it's just the scope isn't wide enough. This is how our society functions. Our bureaucracy, our ease of doing business is so bad. Look, think about it. Does anyone know anyone where they just did the driving test and got their license? No muss, no fuss? I'm just going to throw it out there, right?
Yeah.
Does anyone know? Because it's still a thing. And even it's still a thing where young people apparently, you know, it's more often than not, you're not going to pass unless some sort of, and I'll say it like that, some sort of consideration happens. And it's not that licensing office is so corrupt and we need to clean it up. That is a symptom of a wider problem, right? Favors are done, a lot of people use favors not necessarily for corruption, but just to try to get what they are legally and rightfully entitled to in a reasonable time frame. But that is a crack in the system that will lead to, if it hasn't already, to corruption. And it's not just how law enforcement operates with, we have to informally determine what to enforce and not to enforce, but also the bureaucracy on some level does not act properly. So the systems of government doesn't act properly. And it's a lot of different issues, and there are a lot of people to fix the different areas, but our society seems to be very tolerant of it, and there are those that want it to remain because it's easier for them or they benefit from it somehow, so they don't want to do anything about it. Or you have the politicians who I think don't have the political will, they don't have the desire to run into that wall, to run up that hill, so they're like, why do I need to fix it?
See, and our caller made a statement just now, we're talking about the drug Scott report.
This is Digger Martin.
Right. And the number of officers' names was mentioned in it.
Yeah.
It's very relevant at this point in time to note that all those officers' names that was mentioned is no longer in the organization.
Right.
So it's kind of it is unfair at this point in time.
I think it's similar to politics. At some point, do you say this period where these people were there? Yes, there's similarities,
So
but it's still different people.
If you keep taking that specific incident and a specific period and translate that period, I'm not saying it's wrong, and translate that period into what is taking place now, you miss the opportunity to reform the present organization because you're still in the historical context and saying because it happened then, it is currently happening now. Now, I would not say that the organization outlived policing because I continue to ask, are we still doing policing? Because the principles behind policing is that you police the public population to the extent to when crime start to drop, you don't want them to, you don't have to police anymore. That is when policing becomes relevant and it becomes very efficient because the objective is for people to police themselves, not to be policed.
Right, that's what I was saying earlier. The criminal justice system is overstrained. There are too many bottlenecks and it's not easy to just add capacity to the judiciary and the forensic testing and the like. So you can't just add when the sheer volume of cases is too much.
Yes.
And it's the same thing for police officers. Like at some point we could only recruit so many good police officers. I mean, people already are questioning the standards of the recruits, right? I'm not willing to lower the standards to try to increase because you have to replenish the force. There will be a certain amount of retirees every year.
Is it the standard of the police or the commitment of the police?
Well, that I will generalize that and include that
because
with regards
I could
to
give
the
you a
standard.
narrative. The motto of the organization is to protect and serve with pride. Changing the word pride doesn't change the organization.
Yeah.
Protect and serve. Hold on, hear what I'm saying.
Right.
Persons of your opinion, because we changed the narrative, the motto of the organization, it automatically changed the organization. There's a lot more to be done. Same thing with our national anthem. With every creed and praise.
Creed and race.
Creed and race have an equal place. Does it really relate to what is taking place? So if it is that we are saying that our motto is a motto, right? Unless you start to live it.
Dare I say, this is one of our issues. People want to joke about the Americans being so patriotic and over the top about it. But it's like, yeah, but at the end, they believe in that. They believe in their country. You have to believe in your country to some extent. You don't want to be, a lemming that is a mindless follower of something immoral. But one would hope that you build up your country that it is not immoral.
That's what I'm saying. We have not outlived the policing techniques. Because police techniques remain the foundation of policing. They don't change. They can't change that because those are the foundations of policing. 100, and I'm using this narrative, 100 police officers on the streets of Trinidad and Tobago, on our highways, cannot deal with 10,000 errant drivers.
Yeah.
If I increase those 10,000, that 100 officers to what? Tenfold. Let's say if I give it tenfold, would it still change the attitude of the 10,000 drivers? No, it wouldn't. You know why? Because the 10,000 drivers still of the opinion that their mindset still remains the same.
Yeah.
So it comes down to we can't have more police than citizens.
I think this is the problem, because when you start to enforce the law, then people will start to say, well, this is unfair, why me? It's like, well, we had to start somewhere. But you can't ever have so many police officers that literally every rules infraction will be dealt with simultaneously so that it will always be considered fair.
I have heard a lot of cries and pleas by individuals to have police officers in every street and corner because things are happening in every street and corner.
There's too many streets and corners.
Okay, fine. So then why am I saying police officers supposed to be in every streets and corners? Because police officers comes from every streets and corners, so they may have family and friends in certain areas.
Yeah.
So are you saying now if it is happening there, the police is corrupt and allowing it to happen? My thing about it is that our citizens are really lawless. We are lawless.
Yeah.
Lawless in the context that, not from the context of criminal elements, but minor infractions, we see them as
we're entitled to it?
No, not entitled.
Fine.
It's okay because it's not an issue. So I run through a park on the shoulder, or park on the shoulder, and I park on the side of the road. I only stay in there for a few minutes because I'm going here to do some business and come back. So I'm just seeing it as major issue.
I'm running in and out of the pharmacy, so I could park in the handicap spot.
No, not wrong. Listen, I went to a grocery.
No, but I think that goes to the mindset.
Good, but here, I went to a grocery.
Yeah.
And while in the grocery, the attendants when they were going to put the items in my vehicle, said, based on where you're located, park right here. That was a handicap zone. 5 minutes. Put up in the handicap zone, load the groceries, and I didn't do it. I was parked in another location.
Right.
They called me from that location, tell me come here because it was easier for them to put the items into the vehicle. No, I'm simply saying, if a photograph was taken,
yes,
of that, there would have been a social media, watch where this driver parked. But no, I am simply saying, Sean.
But I will say to that though, as much as it's easier for the attendants, I don't know if that's the right thing to be done.
So I'm showing you this.
Yeah.
It may not have been an issue, a major issue, but at the end of the day, that zone was not for that purpose. Fair enough?
Yes.
So
yes.
I didn't know it happened is when I didn't move my vehicle, somebody else moved my vehicle. By the time I come out, the other driver moved my vehicle. I say, oh Lord, I hope nobody take a picture of my vehicle parked there because it would not look good.
Yeah.
Right? Because I don't do those things.
Right. Okay.
So I just showed it wasn't my vehicle, but just the fact that somebody put the vehicle there and the other driver who was with me did that, and so I wouldn't do that. But at the same time, I could understand certain situations. But what we look at is that we trivialize certain offenses.
I think it's because there should be some amount of leeway to have limited exceptions. But the problem is a 1 millimeter exception turns into a 1 mile expectation.
Right. So we minimize some of the offenses as trivial. Let me just put it, that is small thing.
Speeding apparently is very trivial.
Well, that is not that, well,
that into the interpretation of a lot of people.
And there is something called speeding and driving reckless. Speeding can't be driving, you can't put two of them together. There are some persons who just drive reckless.
Well, because they don't have to speed to drive reckless. Okay, yeah, sure.
And I am all for enforcement of the laws. But when you read some of the laws, you sit down and say to yourself, does this really make any sense?
So with the time we have left, I want to try to just frame more solution-oriented discussions here. One of the first larger things, right, would of course be to just reform the criminal laws, as we've pointed out time immemorial, not only to remove those kinds of laws, but then to fix things like...
be relevant to what is actually taking place in society.
Or the marijuana laws.
Yes.
Make it not just relevant, but practical so that you can actually enforce it, make it enforceable, whatever the situation is. In part, you know, it's so convoluted, I can't always remember why, because every time Ashraf tells me, I still can't believe it. But also, we don't necessarily want to put it out there to the general public, despite the fact that there are a lot of people in the general public that's figured this out already. But there's a disconnect in the ability to enforce certain laws. That's one of them. There are issues with noise pollution and the AMA working together with the police service. I think that's part of the issue, right? There is potentially things that can be done, but the agencies aren't necessarily coming together to do it. But you could update the law and make it easier and simpler. We haven't been doing that. But then, are there any, outside of curfews, is there anything now that you think, I mean, yes, we need to reform the police, but then what do we want to see out of police? Is it because you said policing techniques, you know, they're time immemorial, right? Like, the foundations of policing isn't really going to change that much. You just need to figure out how to apply it as progress happens and new technology. But is it that we just need to actually more fix the accountability of the service and the oversight from the politicians of the service?
I think will
that solve most of it?
One of the things I say that we have to go back to the foundation of what policing is about. The foundation. We're not policing communities. We're not doing policing for the people. We're policing people. So what we are doing is that we are going back into we reverting in 2026 We are independent. We are independent. We have our independence, but we're still operating like we want to use a big stick, massive mentality. Persons don't want that. Communicating with the policing is about not only enforcement of the laws, because you can't be there 24/7 trying to tell somebody to do the right thing. It's about changing our mindset of the individuals. Police officers are not supposed to be seen as a confrontational aspect or being opposed to what we are doing. They're supposed to be part and parcel of the system to reform how we view things. Too much police are confrontational. Our system is confrontational, too much confrontational. It's not about working with the society.
I mean, on some level, you could also say the same thing with other authority figures, like even teachers, right? Where you're going to solve rules infractions by being heavy-handed, as opposed to trying to figure out, all right, why did this happen? And potentially, can I fix it without a heavy-handed approach? Because once you go there,
there is a balance. You must look for the balance. And some of the balance you have to look at. You can't ask police to solve everything that is wrong in Trinidad and Tobago. That is one. That is my view. And this is my view from being up, because you are only limited in certain aspects on how you can achieve those objectives. So when people say, police seem to don't know how to police, and we all reach a limit, to quote San Fernando. Yes, we reach a limit of what policing is about. Police officers are not supposed to be in police station in schools trying to deal with what is happening in discipline in schools. Police officers are not supposed to be on every street and corner telling an individual about parking and where he could sell. Police officers are not supposed to be in your home trying to tell you how to live your life properly and don't commit violence, crime, and abusing. There's a lot of things that police officers should not be there for. Police officers.
But notice, it seems as though to some extent the politicians view the public as wanting this, because it said, we want police officers on every street corner. There's school violence, sending the police. But I think sending the police in school violence is not too dissimilar to the SOE. You could send the police in schools on an emergency basis, but not on a permanent basis. And we spoke about that, not too long ago. You have to solve the violence while they're there.
So you send police officers in high-risk communities to address some of the concerns in high-risk communities. The police is there is not to arrest the criminals alone, It's to allow the law-abiding citizens in those areas an ability to move around freely, to not to be victims of their own space.
But let me just cut to this point here, right? And it might be difficult to answer. We have anti-gang legislation, right? We have laws, of course, against illegal guns and smuggling narcotics and possession of narcotics. And all of these things are already on the books. We don't need an SOE for it. But we also have an SOE. Is it legislation? Is it the law's deficiency why it seems as though we have all the intelligence in the world? Like I said, the government, as far as I'm aware, but this might be outdated. I don't know if it's current. Yeah. They know who the big players are. They know, right? Now, to what extent is it a political decision why they don't go after them? What extent it is difficult to get evidence? That's why they don't go after them. But even for the gang leaders that the current government thinks if we just lock them up, we'll solve crime. What is the disconnect? Because it seems as though the ability to get convictions or to charge, there's something that's not working there. And adding more police is not going to fix that.
So this is an example, and we could run a parallel towards it. In America, the gangs of New York, where you had different gangs from different status. You have Irish, and you have this, and you have
right. Yeah.
But what they realize that petty crimes alone is not going to make them start, right? What they started to do, change their modus, started to get into the hierarchies or the status quo in society, legitimizing their criminal enterprises to the extent that they can now have legitimacy in how they look. But they're still doing criminal activities, but they're legitimizing their enterprise. How are you going to deal with? So take that and bring it into our society there were criminal gangs a number of years and currently existing who used the legislative authorities and the laws of Trinidad and Tobago to register companies legally. As citizens of Trinidad and Tobago can't do it because at the end of the day, you might be involved in criminal activities, but you do not have a criminal record.
Right.
So that doesn't debar you from doing business. Good? They legitimize their businesses, and over the years, they have been legitimizing their businesses, but at the end of the day, when you talk about we keep using the word, the big fish. It's no longer no big fish. It's the fish, the small fish started to grow. So they are now the big fish. So there are more big fish in the pond.
There's no like one big fish.
No one big fish. There are big fishes in the pond. Everybody has a part and parcel, the part to play. So when I listen to people talk about the big man, the big man bringing this, yeah, he or she may be funding it, but let me tell you something. How many fishermen that we have or boats that registered in Trinidad and Tobago that we know that who's actually doing fishing? Right? It's easy to go and register as a fisherman in Trinidad and Tobago together with register a boat. Are you really doing fishing? What is monetizing? How do you monitor those individuals who are actually fishing? Not all they are legitimate persons who do that for a living.
I mean, yes, but I think the problem is now when a fisherman says, well, the fish are in Venezuelan waters, technically speaking, traditionally, that's a red flag for law enforcement to say, are you really fishing? Or are you going to Venezuela
and the reality
to pick up something?
As a fisherman, yes, they may go and do that because they do trade with our neighbors when it comes to fish.
Right.
But at the same time, not all of them is involved in involved in criminal activities. But when you look at it historically, we have allowed and had kept a blind eye to the level of criminal activities for a number of years. So now in 2026, we find difficulty in trying to use the same strategies against these criminals because they're not illegal, they're legal.
So then now, also, how about this? Because we tolerate things, we ignore certain things, but part of that is the population, because I don't want to be involved, I don't report nothing, I don't want to snitch,
Right.
whatever. And perhaps a lot of it comes down to, and maybe this is where Gary Griffith was making some sort of inroads in the problem. The perception of the police force, not just trust and confidence now, but also the perception of professionalism, the perception of capability, you know, of effectiveness, and the perception, yes, you also need an executive, and we don't have time to debate the current executive and what might be the deficiencies or where we think, you know, we wish there were changes. But the command of the service to change how it's being perceived, but in part it has to operate differently as well. And we're not talking about big changes or new uniforms and new procedures, but just be more professional. Don't send people to another jurisdiction to make the report. Things like that.
And that has been consistently some of the challenges we have. This administration has a very difficult challenge at this point in time. However, they are in a better position than many.
Let's take San Fernando. I have something else after that, but San Fernando, on the line caller. Good morning.
Yes, Sean. Mr. Ali, you listen to what you just said?
Say again.
You just admit the incapability of the police service to fight, to go against what do you call it? Organized crime. That's what you just do.
No, I didn't say no.
All that you just say that the Trinidad and Tobago Police Service, because all what you said just now about small fish becoming big fish and opening businesses, you're talking that as a police officer.
No.
And for you to come and admit that on national television,
based on what I'm saying,
tells me and tells all of us what is the problem with the police service.
No, it's not the police service.
Because all you keep talking about intelligence-led policing, eh? Or you keep talking about intelligence-led policing.
San Fernando,
but all you only have information, but all you don't have evidence.
San Fernando, I'm going to clarify first. Hold on before you go.
Yes, Mr.
Criminal,
I'm listening to you.
Because of our systems in Trinidad and Tobago, can an individual without a criminal record open a business? open a company, register a company? Yes or no?
Did he go?
Yes.
Oh, okay.
Yes.
Exactly. So it is that I'm saying, that I am saying, understand this. Hold on, listen, you asked me to respond, so we will discuss. That issue itself, that is one of the issue where we talk about how weak our legislations are. The police cannot enforce all the laws because they are not there to, they cannot facilitate all that. It's not the police don't know how to treat with certain things. You know, just, if a person has legitimate claims, he's a legitimate business, what could the police service do against those individuals who have legitimized their business enterprise legally before they have a legal company? Yes, you may have information or intelligence suggesting that they are involved in activities, but the laws of Trinidad and Tobago say that they are legitimate. How could the police go against the law? And I'm saying what Sean was just simply saying, that there needs to have some reform in some of the laws, understand what the laws are, because it's not about the police service alone. The police is not the law enforcement, the law enforcement agencies alone across the board.
Or the writers of the law.
Let me say this.
Go ahead.
There are enough laws in Trinidad and Tobago to deal with what you're saying there. There are enough laws in Trinidad and Tobago right now to deal with what you're saying there. Because a criminal register company doesn't say.
Hold on. Let me rephrase that.
Law enforcement.
Not a criminal.
That law enforcement can't, if they have information that they can't take and they have to go after that person.
No, but I think
because what you're saying is once you register a company, a criminal register company, you can't touch it. That's what you're saying?
No, I never said they can't touch them.
That might, yes, he might not be spelling it out, but consider this. When the criminal enterprises in America, they start to use new tactics, what you see happen in America, they put new laws in place to address those things. Our criminals are basically...
And we have done that in... And we have done that in Trinidad and Tobago, Sean. We have done that in Trinidad
and Tobago.
All right,
we have an anti-gang legislation, but it's not working.
We not only an anti-gang legislation, Sean. Let me tell you something. The Inland Revenue, they have so many ways to go after these criminals, go after the pockets.
Yeah, that's Inland Revenue.
When they lock up Al Capone in America and he was one of the biggest gangsters, what they lock him up for? Not tax evasion. They lock him up for criminal activity, tax evasion. So don't tell me that they don't have laws in Trinidad and Tobago that we cannot go after these people. There are laws. It is complicity at all levels of law enforcement, including the states.
I will take that because that is exactly what I'm going to bring. When you say complicity in law enforcement, we tend to put police officer, the Trinidad and Tobago Police Service, as the ones are complicit. But when you talk of law enforcement, the legislation of Trinidad and Tobago, there are several bodies that have authorities within
certain areas.
They are not.
Mr. Ali, doesn't the police service, doesn't the FIB under the police service?
And they don't go after every situation like that. Listen, we could discuss this back and forth from different perspectives.
Caller, you just said Inland Revenue XYZ.
They are much more than just. It is just. Enforcement of the laws of Trinidad and Tobago is not only the responsibility of the Trinidad and Tobago Police Service. It has to go hand in hand.
Right, but the police are not going to detect things and then tell the Board of Inland Revenue, hey, look at that. The Board of Inland Revenue has to tell the police, we found something in our work.
Sean, stop being an apologist for the police service, Sean.
No, it's not being an apologist.
The police service once the police service implement, it is about strategy, and if it is that they don't implement strategy, it will continue, because we have seen, just like Mr. Ali knows, that he knows and I know, that criminal enterprise has built itself over the years in Trinidad and Tobago to become big enterprise in Trinidad and Tobago.
Yes, but caller.
Under the umbrella of the Trinidad and Tobago government and the Trinidad and Tobago Police Service.
Caller. The police cannot just subpoena randomly, or I think you're a criminal, I want to see your financials.
No records to support.
Right? Isn't that so? They have to have a starting point. Now, the body that oversees, the bodies that oversees things like taxes and audits and etc., They have to tell the police that there's something not right before the police could just go in.
Sean, you seem not to understand how the laws of Trinidad and Tobago and organizations in Trinidad and Tobago work. Okay? The police service can go because of how the system is.
So then
we have
when caller, stop, wait, no, caller, stop, wait, when can the police go in? When? Just answer that.
I am so surprised.
Caller.
I am so surprised
Caller. When can the police
probably any
go in?
Probably any Karen to come and tell you this. Because only when Karen tell you certain things, you won't listen.
Listen, caller, you are speaking on the police and you're directly and indirectly to me as an officer. And I'm telling you, if you are not a police officer, I'm telling you from all my experience as a police officer, you cannot just pick up your thing, pick up and say, I am going to investigate something unless a report has been made to you or you have information that suggests something takes place. If you do not have, we do not have the legitimate or the legal authority to just enter and start to investigate. Right? So I understand what you are trying to say, that there are the mechanisms in place in the laws, but if it is not brought to the attention of the police, it is only speculation. And there are legitimate enterprises right now who may have been involved in a lot of different activities. Let me tell you something. Police don't investigate what is taking place on the seas. They only investigate when we get a catchment of or seize some narcotics. There's a certain amount of investigation can take place in terms of narcotics. People normally will, and the public will say, the police can't do anything about it. They're never finding anybody. Obviously, you can't find anybody or nobody who's coming forward to give information because everybody is hiding information from the police because why? They have their predisposition that the police is corrupt. Fair enough, you could say so, but at the end of the day, society itself is a lawless nature.
Because you are sounding as if the police so ineffective.
That's in reality.
The police service and then just make a military state.
The point is we are not a military state.
If all that you are saying.
Caller, could the police go into your house to investigate you at their will? And
all I'm saying is that the police service have something called the Financial Intelligence Bureau.
The Financial Investigation Unit works. The Financial Investigation Unit along. If you listen and stop putting a narrative across and not listen to get some conversation, you will just keep on your own side.
You all are just making excuses.
Everything is an excuse because you don't want to see the reality of it. The Financial Investigation Unit works alongside the banking sector. Once the banking sector does the red flags for the police, not the police.
Caller, do you think that the criminals are going to have everything in their name? They're not going to have everything in their name. So I suspect he's a criminal. It's in his name. I will just look into it because I suspect he's a criminal. I'll disregard all sense of natural justice, first of all, right? And look into it without a report, without necessary enough evidence to get a warrant. But it's not going to be in all of their name. They're going to hide it. And the Financial Intelligence Unit is not big enough to literally go over every banking transaction with a fine-tooth comb. Right? They might, listen, yes, the police stumble on crimes on their own. That is not something that you can depend on throughout the length and breadth of crime in the country. There has to be, who reports crimes? We can't, because if we go to murders, it's the standard that the police have to be there on the street corner when the murder is taking place. Otherwise, the police is at fault. How are they going to check every financial transaction, every financial record, every individual account? It could be under the name of some random person. It could be under a fake name. It could be under a family member's name. But can you go after the family member now when you don't have evidence of the family member being a criminal? Can you then somehow magically get warrants just so? You are underestimating the criminals. They know the system. They've had decades of exploiting it. So, and then what you're doing is, it's not about protecting the police, but you are discounting the fact that there are other areas that are also complacent. This is me you're talking to. Do I look like the blind, biased supporter of the police could do no wrong? But we are not in a military state, so you cannot just assume that we could cut through the thing. Yes, it is illegal. You have to find the crime first. Murder is illegal. I have to find the murderer. I can't just say somebody in that area is a murderer, or I suspect I know who the murderer is, so based off of my suspicion, I'll just go. They had to get Al Capone's financial records. They didn't just claim it because he's a criminal, and we think he's a criminal because we can't prove it in a court of law, because they never convicted him of smuggling. So what is the basis for them now to get his records? They had to find some way to get there. They couldn't just say, oh, well, we want it. Because if you just do that, oh, you think he's a criminal? Okay, warrant. No, they had to have enough evidence. So it's not that straightforward. That's why I said, when it comes now in foreign jurisdictions, they will make specific laws. The laws we put in place is the laws that they tell us to put in place that doesn't necessarily treat with our specific situations. So to say that we have all the laws, I can't necessarily agree with that. I can't, right? It can't always be a grand conspiracy where an entire institution of 10,000 men want the system to fail. It can't always be that. Because otherwise, if that's the case, then the problem is bigger than even you would imagine. So, we have a couple comments to get through. I know we're over time. Let's take the last comment quick. Will the Pratt and Morgan ruling still apply? I think it will. This was asked before. I think it will still apply until a new precedent is set, because that happens all the time. You get a case, and then for whatever reason, the case is updated. Technically, Wade v. Roe was not the most recent abortion case in the American courts. That was in the 80s. There was a case in the 90s. Because it's a precedent that was more or less being utilized in our criminal justice system, it won't just be automatically wiped away. This is a layman speaking. I could be wrong. So I believe the CCJ would then have to now, a case needs to be brought before them, and then they would need to overturn the Pratt and Morgan ruling, right?
One of the things you have to remember is that should administrative challenges be the decider why I cannot have my day before the court? That is what it simply means. You have 5 years to put me, because if I'm on death row, if I've been put on death row for 5 years,
yeah.
After 5 years, you cannot address my concern between it's unfair and inhumane for me to be sitting psychologically on. There's a lot of psychological issues with terms of and how they treat somebody who has been sentenced to death, right? And they must be given all the time to review the case. I'm not saying that I'm comfortable with somebody who commit a murder. No, we have to be careful. We have to be very careful. At the end of the day, somebody who has been sentenced to death has been sentenced to death through the courts. He or she must be also given the opportunity to present a case why I should not be killed. Right? He didn't say I didn't do it. Mm-hmm. But
well, some do.
In some circumstances, what I'm saying, they're not saying they're not doing it, but 5 years is it has to be within 5 years is unrealistic. You can't have somebody sitting on a death row for more than 10 years. Right? It's inhumane.
Well, I mean, you see,
so that is why that is why it is so important that they say that administrative issues should not be the challenge.
Now, to what extent is it administrative?
There's a lot of administrative.
To what extent? Well, I mean, I believe so, but I'm just being devil's advocate in the sense of, I also wouldn't necessarily want to say, oh, we have to ensure this is all done within 5 years, because then the flip side is you will have the process potentially be expedited to the point where the defendant now will feel as though there's not enough time to properly assess his case.
When I use the word administrative issues, I'm not using it in a negative connotation. Administrative issues might simply mean that because of the workload or the amount of cases before the court.
To me, that is a negative situation.
No, I wouldn't say it's a negative, because realistically that might be.
Remember, you're not blaming the judiciary for being overworked. You're blaming the fact that it is overworked.
Exactly, but then at the same time, each case must be given its own merit. Right?
Right. That's what I'm saying. It might require a certain amount of time. Is 5 years enough time?
And that
because I
some
can easily see, okay, we get the time down for the appeals process on murder cases down to less than 5 years. And then our defendant is, Your Honor, it's inhumane that I don't have more time to go over my case.
And those are some of the, a lot of different conversation with respect to having persons on death sentence, on death row for such a period of time. The last set of persons that was hanged,
I mean, it went rather fast, right?
It went rather fast. We keep saying that having persons having death sentence is a deterrent to crime. And I'm saying no, that is not a deterrent to crime.
Well,
that may be a consideration. What is a deterrent?
It is a reasonable assumption that it's not because of the mindset of the criminals. However, we don't know because the public, a lot of the public, including probably some of the criminals, is we don't have a death sentence practically.
You know what should be a deterrent to crime? Commit an offense today, tomorrow you're behind your face, you'll be fine. When I'm saying before the courts, I mean before the courts are not going to be able to do everything else. Right? So there's another conversation by itself.
All right, can we just take the first comment from earlier on the show? We don't have to take both. Embroiled in political assassinations and pointing fingers rather than dealing with substantive issues. Yes, I've said that already. We don't need to go any further. Crime fuel, especially drug trade. We should be demanding the PM hand over the list for police investigation or the PM be held to account if she simply got. She can't hand over the list. She can't hand over the list to who? To an international body. She got it from an international body. She can't. You can't hand over something like that.
No, you can't.
Right? It all comes back down to, and to be fair for Mr. San Fernando, if he had some patience, we're going to get to this point. There are deficiencies in the police service. And I think a lot of it comes to a lack of accountability.
A lot of law enforcement agencies.
Right? And a lot of other law enforcement agencies that have jurisdiction over other things. The lack of accountability applies to all of them in the sense of NSC, political leadership, right? Because down to how much resources is being committed. So until I see, I'm not saying that the politician could literally wave their hand and solve everything with a snap of the fingers, but I'm not seeing any beginnings to change the status quo. And the status quo is not working on all fronts: road traffic, noise, illegal narcotics, violent crime, etc., etc. On all fronts, it's not working. And to me, on some level, at the very least, let's start at the top, because the top seems to have a lot of deficiencies on accountability. If the bosses are not really doing their job, why will the lower level ranks do their job? Right? No one's holding them to account. We arrested a commissioner, we don't even know what law she broke. We kidnapped a man from Barbados, they're still trying to say, oh, it wasn't kidnapping. It happened. But here's the thing. Here's the smoke screen now with the political assassinations. We're not really seeing the current government do anything to say what happened to Brent Thomas will not happen again. So therein lies my overall issue. Not necessarily specific enough for some people, but it is what it is. We have to end there because we're over time. So I want to thank all the callers. It was interesting to see Mr. San Fernando so passionate. I've never seen it to that extent before, right? Thanks to the comments. I couldn't get to all of the comments, but thanks to the commenters. Nevertheless, there was a comment on the whole Jammeh situation. To be honest, I don't necessarily think it's worthy of extended conversation. He is retired. He really should be retired. To be fair, perhaps I gave him too much attention yesterday and today, right? Dr. Rowley, stay retired, right? I think it'll just do everybody a favor. Stay retired. Thanks, Ashraf, for joining me once again.
Yeah, Sean, and just reiterate, I want to say Eid Mubarak to the Muslim community tomorrow, and that of Trinidad and Tobago. We hope you have a safe day tomorrow.
I'll just say this, because we're going to get, and I said this before, we're going to get a whole sorts of messages from various public figures about doing the right thing and religious tolerance and all of these wonderful words in religious holidays, especially in religious holidays, right? We get them for each one. Hindu, Muslim, Christian. But what we don't necessarily see, just like with the SOE, is what is the follow-up? Is it just something temporary that they put out there? And it is not rarely practiced in the long run. Folks, have a good weekend. Stay safe. Remember your allegiance to the Republic and to each other. Be nice. We'll see you next week. Bye-bye.
WESN